I would like to uh, welcome the host Saili to this meeting, and now she will further introduce our panelists today. Uh, this particular webinar has been brought to you by Riveris and the Chamber of Tax Consultants. And hope you enjoy it. Feel free to ask questions through the Q&A button which is there on Zoom. If you are facing any troubles, please contact one of the contacts that has been given to you in your email. Thank you, and Saili, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Shees. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Saili. I am a chartered accountant and I work as the Senior Product Manager for Tax at Riveris. In today's webinar, jointly offered by Riveris and the Chamber of Tax Consultants, we'll be discussing the potential tax and regulatory consequences of the COVID-19 and how to manage these obligations in this challenging time. So here's the format for the webinar to give you an idea of what exactly to expect from this. So I will first briefly introduce our two expert panelists. Then we will start the discussion around today's topic. And then we'll open up the floor to give you all an opportunity to ask specific questions to our panelists. And in the mid also, you can keep on asking questions and we'll take up the questions wherever feel we can chime in your questions. So I hope that sounds good. So great. So let's start. Let's get started with the panel introductions. So today with us we have Mr. Sunil Kothare. Hello, sir. So Sunil sir, who is a tax professional who he has nearly 4 decades of experience. He has straddled multiple roles in his long career, from practicing chartered accountant to head of tax functions of large financial institutions. And in his role, he has witnessed and been instrumental in crafting survival strategies for tax functions of large corporate entities during previous financial crisis. He led the tax function of Citibank for a very long time, and currently he is the senior tax counsel for HDFC Bank Group. We also have Mr. Jayant Gokhale. Good afternoon, sir. He is a prolific practicing chartered accountant and a partner in Gokhale and Sathe, which is a multi-member professional services firm. And apart from advising clients on audit and taxation, he has been at the forefront of various committees of ICAI and Accounting Standard Board, as well as Auditing and Assurance Standard Board. He has also been a member of the Central Council of ICAI for 12 years. He has seen the challenges and various developments of audit and taxation profession from close quarters. Additionally, Jayant sir has also been an independent director on the boards of many financial institutions like Syndicate Bank, LIC, AMC, etc. I would also like to mention that Sunil sir and Jayant sir both have been the managing council members of the Chamber of Tax Consultants. So once again, I welcome all you to today's webinar. And so going forward, coming to today's topic for discussion. Over the last 3 weeks, we have seen some most dramatic changes, like cities and countries being shut down, travel bans, the borders are being sealed, and the markets are super volatile, and etc. So the question here is, were we ready for this? Did we know what impact it could have on our businesses or the economy? And the answer is a big no. Obviously, we did not see this coming. But obviously in these times, duty of care comes first. We care for our people, our employees, and we want them to be safe in these unusual times. But with people working remotely and the businesses not being able to work at that full capacities, this is presenting significant challenges to our businesses and the organizations. And in such times, we need to respond rapidly to such challenges. So Sunil sir, Jayant sir, what was your first reaction or impact analysis of this situation? What impact this might have on our economy?
So Jayant, you want to go first?
No, you go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks. So Saili, when we look at the economic impact, I would say that we look at 4 different levels. One is at the global level. Second is at the national level. Third is at the individual level. And fourth is within the third subset, the impact on tax professionals. So we start with the broader set. What we see is almost known everywhere. Almost every government and the World Bank, etc., have scaled down the economic growth projections. So everybody expects that the economic activity will contract. That's point number one. Point number two is because of the contraction in economic activity, it is expected that employment opportunities will contract. And what I understand is that the US has seen something like 6.6 million job losses in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is an indicator of what it could mean for other countries. Unfortunately, I don't have the data on other countries as yet. When we come from there to the national level, we are already seeing that the unorganized sector, which is otherwise known in the press as migrant labor moving, if they are moving from places of work to their native place, it means that they do not expect any immediate chance of employment. Consequently, there could be a reduced rate of growth for the GDP, and only there have been projections scaled down by the Government of India, by the Reserve Bank of India, and by the World Bank. All three have different rates of growth projected for the India GDP. And obviously, all of this is impacting corporates. So corporates' earnings may be under some stress. How much stress, we don't know. There could be some sectors which may face less stress, or some sectors which may in fact prosper in these times of stress. But when we go down to the individual level, lower employment opportunities means lower incomes, maybe people being underemployed, those who are actually employed being underemployed, those who are not employed seeking alternative routes of making two ends meet. So all of this metamorphosis may occur. Whether it will last for long, one doesn't know. And for tax professionals or professionals in general, if there is growth in economic activities, there is likely to be pressure on fee levels, opportunities for new areas to be explored in of client service. That's how I feel this headed. And just to kind of round up, that one doesn't know whether this will be a short period up to, say, the next 3-6 months, or whether this will be long drawn. Perhaps this will mean that we relook at the way we do things, but more about that later. Over to you, Jain.
Yeah, just to add on a couple of quick points, I think more from the macro perspective. I had also written an article, so I'm bound to stick by that view. Much earlier I had written. Basically, that this is a crisis which should not be wasted, in the sense that it could be a great opportunity. I say this for two reasons. One is that, contrary to what is generally perceived, I believe that coupled with the COVID crisis has been the crisis of demand on oil, which has led to a huge savings on the oil front. And therefore, the government is not going to be as badly off as people would expect, because very few economies are as dependent on oil as India is. And with the price slumping to $30-32 per barrel, my rough reckoning on the benefit that India will get is around 1,70,000 crores. 1,70,000 crores, which is 20% of our net deficit. So we are not going to be that badly off in terms of deficit as some of the other economies are going to be. Secondly, with the in-house demand, our economy would not what it is EU countries and the US. So these markets are more likely to be stable, which will see inflow of funds, is what my expectation is. And therefore, I don't see such a bleak picture if really one is going to be looking at good government policies, and one has reason to be optimistic about that, seeing the way this crisis has been tackled. I would expect that with a lull maybe of 6 to 8 months, maybe in the financial year 21-22, we could see a sharp upswing in both the economy as well as the performance. That's how I look at it. Of course, one will have to take a lot of steps along the way and cannot take it for granted that we will be necessarily going in the right direction.
Okay.
What do you?
Okay. So how coming down to business level, how has this impacted your current work?
Yeah. So Sunil, you would like to take that first?
No, why don't you start, Jayant, and then I'll take over the.
Okay. Okay. See, I'll put it this way. Of course, since we are going to discuss specifically the ordinance at a slightly later point of time, let me go to the more general concepts. Two things. One is, the fact that people have been forced to stay at home has awakened them to huge capabilities that they have, which were hitherto unexploited or unutilized or underutilized, grossly underutilized. So, the knowledge awareness has come in, and this crisis, I believe, is not going to be unless one finds a cure. And HIV and SARS took considerable amount of time by the time we could come to some concrete solution in terms of vaccine or antibodies, etc. So it's not going to be something that end of June or end of July this is going to get over. Social distancing is going to become the norm. Video conferences, etc., is going to become the norm in the future, if not as rigorously imposed as today, but still going to be extremely popular. And that, I believe, will force a restructuring of many of the practices. I don't know whether I'm certain, just to give an illustration, although the act has already been amended, Income Tax Act, to enable e-hearings, the entire concept was not so well received or accepted so far. But I'm sure in the coming months, this is going to become very, very common. And therefore, people who are actually spending a lot of time going to various income tax offices, waiting over there and so on, are going to need to restructure their time and their commitments. So that is going to be the immediate direct impact. We'll come to that more in detail if you wish slightly later, but let's look at the big picture first. So I thought, let me just start with this. If Sunil wishes to say something on this.
Yes. So Jayant, I absolutely agree with you that the digital platform will become more prominent in business use. But even before we go there, I think one area which maybe will be paid more attention to by businesses is what we call as continuity of business. And those which are global or large organizations generally have continuity of business plans for situations like these, and which are imperially tested in terms of readiness. It's like having a fire drill maybe every three months in the building. Something similar to that, but our technology platform is working. If a location is shut down or if a city is shut down, how do you ensure service delivery to your clients? Many large businesses do it. Many large businesses do it very vigorously, to the extent that more often than not, some of the employees in those large organizations feel it's a waste of time. The current situation proves all that time spent or invested has not been wasted, because testing of the continuity of business plans, whether they actually work in a stress situation, has actually proved helpful. The impact to medium-sized businesses, which may or may not have the same level of rigors in continuity of business plans, or certainly to small businesses. But when I look at the street corner grocer, he doesn't even know what is a continuity of business plan, but he still is surviving in this lockdown period. So it is for the businesses which are in the medium segment and going to large, which will have emphasis on business continuity planning. what we'll also see is change in business strategies. As we have seen, there are, and as we expect it to be in future, at least for some reasonable period of time, maybe for the next few months, there could be a protectionism amongst the governments across the globe. Make it local, buy locally, create local economic activity, and so on, which means that countries which are export driven or businesses which are export driven will have to re-strategize their plans and see how they fit in within the framework of this protectionism that could come up. Back to you, Saili.
Okay.
I'll just add one micro view on this because this is something that I have experienced. And we are talking of the legal and tax profession. How many senior counsels today would accept a briefing meeting before a high court hearing on video? I don't think it happens really at a senior counsel level today. But I think in the 3 months to come or the 6 months to come, I would not be required to travel from North Bombay, where my office is, to South Bombay to a senior counsel's office, maybe spend 3 or 4 hours for a 20-minute briefing. The entire situation is going to change with the client being at some video conference from Kandivali or wherever he is based, or maybe Pune, the consulting chartered accountant or the lawyer briefing maybe anywhere in mid-city, and the senior counsel possibly at his own office in Fort, somewhere near the High Court. This sort of concept I don't think has ever been used by any senior counsel as of date. This is going to change, and it's going to change the way we use our time. Otherwise, we spend 4 or 5 hours for a 15-minute briefing, which I think will change the entire economics and dynamics of appellate practice.
But sir, in addition to what you just mentioned, when it comes to ensuring good due diligences or audits, considering that people are working remotely, the offices are not open, and not having access to maybe important documents or premises of the client, how can we ensure good due diligences or audits?
Okay, so I think I'll take that up. No, actually, this is a misnomer, because nowadays large organizations already have built-in systems for scanning and storing all documents. Just the other day, Chamber's own webinar, a couple of days back, they were talking of QuickBooks, whereby you would even Xerox your petrol bill and your stationery bill, which gets added to QuickBooks, which is a feature that is there in a standard software. So in the years to come or in the months to come, the process of digitizing your paper record is going to become so prevalent, and now it is going to be hastened. It is not that it would not have come. It would have come over a period of 3 to 5 years. Now it will come within a period of 3 to 6 months. But I am sure that is not going to be a big blockage on the audit trail. Some checks, some additional responsibilities, some disclosures will be necessary, but it is not in the realms of impossibility. Rather, I would say it is definitely possible. It's a question of time, 3 months, 6 months.
So Jayant, if I may just supplement to answer Saili's question more specifically on due diligences. So Saili, you were at KPMG and you would have seen that at least in some M&A due diligence, M&A transaction due diligences, the participants create an e-data room, and potential bidders access the record on e-data rooms. I have been fortunate to have participated, albeit in my industry career, in quite a few of such due diligences where the transactions were global in character. You never see the other person's face. The data can be shared on the e-data room in a manner where the person who's sharing that data can limit time for which it is available, can limit the possibility of download or otherwise, can limit whether copies can be taken, and if copies are taken, it also records the digital trail of who is downloaded and what time and so on and so forth. So those technology platforms are available and are currently being used in at least M&A transactions. Maybe they will become more prevalent, as things go the way the lockdown is and people learn new skills and change work habits.
Just to add, not that this is going to do away entirely with physical verification, but the relevant proportionality of that would be, let's say today it is almost 90% or 70, 80%. It would go the reverse way. It would be 20% or 30% at max, and the ratio would be reversed. So 70% or 80% would be electronically verified. Some part would possibly be to make the final cross-checking. Some part would have to be done on site or at the client's place or at the registry or wherever. But that would significantly come down. So it's not impossible. It will be a process of transition until, let's say, the government makes accessible, say, the registration documents. Already all registration documents are scanned by the authorities. Only thing is they have not been made accessible to public at large. ROC makes records available to us as download documents. On payment of certain fees, you can get certain downloads. So that even, say, mortgage documents could be provided as downloads. I don't think they are available today, but it will come. It requires some infrastructural changes, but I'm sure it will come.
Sure, technology will definitely help us in these times. So maybe coming to the main topic of the of today's discussion, we all are aware that to minimize some of the adverse effects of the lockdown, the government of India has introduced new compliances and regulatory changes for both direct and indirect taxes. And then obviously there are certain related developments to it. So maybe to list down a few or mention a few, there are extension of deadlines for compliances and other procedural actions. There's waiver of charges on delayed payments like advance tax, self-assessment tax, equalization levy, TDS, TCS, etc. Then there has also been an extension of date for opting for the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, and no additional 10% amount would be levied if the amount is paid by 30th of June, and also extension of date for paying tax under Sabka Vishwas scheme, that is under the indirect taxes, and other related developments like the EMI moratorium or maybe PF and other labor laws impact, etc. So these relaxations will definitely give respite to the assessees who are facing difficulty in meeting deadlines to file petitions or maybe applications, appeals, etc. Due to the lockdown situation. However, the businesses will still face some challenges when it comes to incurring certain fixed costs like salaries or maybe rent, etc. So, having said all of this, what would be the impact on the working capital in the long term?
So if I may try and answer that question, Saili. Yes, there will be fixed costs which are to be incurred, salaries, office rental, as you mentioned. There could be some savings because if you're not exactly opening the office and running the AC, not running the lights for a reasonably long period of time, then you save on electricity bills. Although in some cases, if there's a standing connectivity load, then based on that connectivity load, especially in the manufacturing sector, in plants, etc., there's a connectivity load for which you are charged, irrespective of whether you run the plant or not. So that charge would still be coming in. In addition, businesses will find that suddenly there are some unanticipated costs. For example, testing of employees who come in post the lockdown being lifted. There could be costs in terms of getting all of the safety equipment in place. There could be costs of accommodating some employees who have been working through the lockdown period because they are necessary or essential services, and they can't commute long distances, especially in cities like Mumbai, where people rely on public transport and the local trains are shut down. So these are costs that businesses will incur. Will it have an impact on working capital? Yes, and to some extent the government is trying to mitigate that impact by saying, look, you can pay your GST by 5th of May, for the month of March. The normal due date would have been 20th of April. They are also saying that we will grant refunds of income tax where the refund due is up to 5 lakhs rupees. Not that it makes a big difference to the large businesses. 5 lakh rupee refund will not pay any significant part of the costs. But for a medium-sized business, those costs, those refunds or that deferral will help. Certainly, secondly, the RBI, as we have seen, has been very, very proactive in the COVID initiative. In fact, around mid-March, they asked financial sector players on their state of readiness and continuity of business plans. Then on 27th of March, they reduced the cash reserve ratio for banks. Then they also increased the facility of standby facility, and so on and so forth. They have also now announced on 1st of April that the Ways and Means advances to states and union territories will also be re-looked at. So that it's not just working capital stress for businesses. The RBI anticipates that the states and union territories will also need support in terms of liquidity, and the RBI is well geared, well aware of it, and doing it in a proactive manner. What I would expect is that many of the policy decisions on the part of the RBI will include, amongst others, the relaxation in terms of working capital financing to be done by banks or non-bank financial institutions to small and medium businesses and also to large businesses. So I think it will not be a single one size fits all kind of solution. Between the government, the RBI, and the businesses, there will be a holistic solution to address the situation. What shape or form it will take, I'm unable to say today for a variety of reasons. But am I optimistic? I'm optimistic, yes.
Okay, let me for a change give a slightly negative perspective, although I am usually very optimistic. On the problem, on just taking up the same working capital issue, we have a lot of funds available to the bank. RBI, as Sunil has said, has been very proactive in giving a lot of relaxations. There are funds lying. SBI has reduced the rate of interest because there is so much of surplus funds. The question is, who will take the risk of lending? Especially the problem is more acute in MSMEs and small business, because NPA does not go away. And the problem is that for people to kickstart a business which has actually stalled somewhere in between the business cycle, already many of them were actually at the verge of NPA or living from hand to mouth. For those businesses to revive, they require an additional infusion of funds. What would be more important is some sort of government guarantee for an interim period, until which time the bank is not burdened with the incremental NPA. Otherwise, there are businesses that require funds. There are bankers who have funds, but there is nobody willing to bridge the gap because the advance might simply go bad. Because despite the proper intentions of the businessman, the demand just might not take up. So it's a dicey scenario, and it's not going to be easy, even though funds are available. So cash flow would be available maybe at some places for good borrowers, but for persons with a, just about managing record, it's going to be a tough time, and getting incremental finance is going to be extremely difficult in this scenario, because banks are worried about their own bottom line in the first place. Banks, BFC, so it's going to be tough.
Definitely, sir, it is going to be tough, and there might be certain things that we haven't anticipated at all, and we'll have to take care of it. So,
in fact, sorry, should I just add, I'm jumping actually to the Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, but
Sure, sir.
what many people have spoken about is about the extension of time. On the cash flow issue, there is an important point. Suppose I have to settle, they have extended, the government has said, okay, instead of 30th March, 31st March, you can pay up to 30th June. But do I have the liquidity to pay? That is going to be a big issue because I have to first pay my creditors, I have to pay my wages. If I have to settle a dispute which is hanging fire for last 3 years, at the moment I don't have to pay anything. I have already made my 20% payment. I am willing to settle the dispute provided I have the liquidity to pay by June, which is going to be a tough call for many of the smaller enterprises. So despite the intent, it is not a question that whether the date should be extended up to 30th June. It is also the question that when am I required to pay? I may file my proposal by 30th June, but am I going to be given incremental time, maybe with an added cost, to file later because I simply don't have the liquidity to pay and settle a dispute just now? So that's a cash flow issue in Vivad Se Vishwas.
So coming to that litigation point, sir, so considering there's a lockdown and all the courts are not working currently, and it is expected that the pendency of litigation will go further, it will increase further. So should in-house teams or maybe tax practitioner revisit their or maybe their clients' litigation strategies to assess the further impact in delay of outcome, because this will also add to the cash outflow parameter.
Yeah, I'll tackle that.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So yes, definitely it will require reassessment. It will require, there are a number of changes that have come about. This is one part. That is the Vivad Se Vishwas provides another option. The larger scenario that whether one can afford to litigate is going to be the second aspect. The recent changes that have been made in the limits, that is by circular, what limits have been prescribed for department to go and appeal. That has been increased 50 lakhs, I think, if I recollect correctly, at IT80 level. Below that, unless it's an issue involving a legal principle, a department cannot go and appeal. So there is a whole host of changes that are going to come. At High Court level, it has become 1 crore. That means the amount of income in dispute has to be 3 crore rupees, practically. So for the larger litigation, there will be an entire change in mindset. And more importantly, I would also believe that as things change and as these changes are taking place, the judicial mindset will also be changing because they are, after all, part of society. So a person who is litigating on a frivolous point may not get the sort of technical interpretation, benefit of technical interpretation that he was getting so far in a changed business environment. So the entire gamut of litigation parameters, so to say, would have to be reconsidered when advising a client that should they go in for litigation or should they not. There are a few points, but maybe I'll come to that again afterwards once we go into slightly more detail. I think let Sunil have a word. I should not monopolize the discussion over here.
So on
Yes,
Vivad Se Vishwas, thanks Jayant, on Vivad Se Vishwas, the scheme, my sense was, and maybe I have the large businesses in mind, the thought process always among the finance managers, tax managers was, number one, is this case likely to go in my favor in the long run? And if so, what is the cost of pursuing that litigation? And on that basis, they have come to a conclusion one way or the other that yes, this is an item which needs to be settled. And I believe the chairman CBDT has also invited suggestions on how the scheme could be refined further. That is what I read just late last evening, which means that the government perhaps is contemplating making the scheme even more flexible than it is today. And I don't know how many people in the audience or the participants of the webinar will agree that the scheme is flexible today. I know there are quite a few people who don't feel the scheme is flexible. But in that context, what comes to my mind is look at the several steps that the government has taken over the last few days or maybe last 2 weeks or so, particularly on tax front. Extending return filing deadlines under the ordinance up to 30th June or such later time as they may prescribe. So whether it's return of TDS, whether it's filing of the TDS returns, whether it's say filing of other returns which are due in May and so on and so forth. All those forms 61A, 61B, what we call specified financial transaction returns, those have been extended at least at the very minimum till 30th June. As I mentioned earlier during the webinar, the deadline for GST returns also have been extended, and based on categorization of small, medium, and large taxpayers or large businesses. And this, when the government is consciously aware that this is a time where the revenue collection is under pressure, and despite that, having cognizance of the situation that taxpayers find themselves in, the government has extended timeline for filing GST returns, which means that the government knows that the revenue could be delayed. The government knows that people may not be able to comply with the deadlines that was laid down in the statute. The government has taken special powers under the ordinance for GST by the insertion of section 168A to say that not just this scenario, but any other event, there's a flood and so on and so forth, government can extend deadlines for compliances. This is what gives me hope.
But it would also be very interesting to see how the revenue authorities would react in these times. Would they go more aggressive, or will they support businesses?
I'll just add, I think I do agree with Sunil on this note that in fact the wording of the on 30th June or such other date. So the government is clearly thinking ahead, which is a good sign that even 30th June extension may not suffice. I think another point which one must bring to the credit of the government is that they have said that all refunds up to 5 lakhs will be expedited and are being given. So they have taken cognizance that MSMEs are hard hit by cash crunch. So they are issuing the refunds. Worth appreciating. As Saili said, how the thought at the top percolates to the field level is going to be very, very important, because on one side, the field level has got certain targets. Those targets are very often pretty oppressive. And at the conceptual level, I think they are taking very good cognizance of the ground reality in terms of taxpayer. But if they still maintain stiff targets for the revenue officials, then it will be difficult. I'm sure they'll do something, but the mindset of the revenue officials of extracting tax to the last pie needs to also undergo a change, which hopefully, along with the other changes that will happen. Let's wait and see.
So true. Just to supplement, Jan, I believe the direct tax target has already been revised downwards from the budget proposal.
Yes.
And I'm not sure, at least I'm not aware whether the GST target has been similarly revised downwards, but I'm sure that will also come in due course of time if it has not already been decided. So the government message to the field also is in line with its thinking at the top and the concessions that have been given over the last 2 or 3 weeks. So I continue to be hopeful and optimistic.
Correct. Agreed.
So looking at the broader view, what would be your assessment about what will happen to global initiatives like BEPS, MLI? Will these be put on the back burner because we have other things to take care of?
So Jayant, if you don't mind, I will take that first.
Yeah.
So Saili, the initiative of BEPS, even before we go to MLI and BEPS, let me touch upon transfer pricing, because that is something that tax professionals handle day in, day out. And maybe BEPS and MLI, etc., come in when there is a broader conceptual discussion on how much income is attributable to a particular activity and whether it falls under pillar 1 or pillar 2 and so on and so forth. So if I were a tax manager with presence in of the organization in several countries, and it could be any of the large Indian corporates, it would also be a medium-sized business which has a sales office outside or a sales exclusive sales representative outside. The question of, do I need to relook at my business model given the current possibilities I indicated, that there could be increased protectionism. So if there is increased protectionism and I have a sales office outside India for representing my business from here, then is his job becoming more difficult? Is he taking increased risks? All of that will come into play when looking at transfer pricing. Or if there's funding done from overseas into India or from India into an overseas branch or a, shall I say, subsidiary. Is that funding in line with the cost of funding in line with the changed global scenario? Or is my transfer pricing policy static and says, okay, this is how it shall be? Then I think there's a lot of work for tax professionals to do, not just practitioners, in-house people as well, to rewrite some of the transfer pricing policies, at least have a fresh look at what is being done. And in that context, coming to the BEPS and MLI initiatives, the discussion always in the past has been functional assets and risk analysis, what is called FAR analysis, functional assets and risk. And the thinking now was that under the new pillar 1 approach or the hybrid approach that is even suggested under BEPS, that we look at not just functional asset risk, but also look at markets. And if there is protectionism, then protectionism could be for physical markets, yes, that would have an effect on the profit attribution. But will this affect digital platforms? My sense is no. So the straightforward answer, and maybe it's too premature to give a straightforward answer to the question, will transfer pricing policies change? Yes or no, depending on whether they have been inflexible or they have been flexible to take into account new circumstances, new business models. Will there be change in attribution principles? Certainly there will be. Will it mean that the OECD will change its thinking? The OECD has put out its thinking on what should be the changed approach in the new scenario of COVID-19 threat across the world, the pandemic as it is called. In terms of digital taxation, though, I believe that perhaps many governments will look at digital taxation because they cannot perennially be under stress of deficit financing, and this year's pandemic has created a hole in the pockets of many governments. So whether it is Europe, whether it is India, digital taxation could become more prominent. So therefore it's a mixed bag. What it means for the tax professional is, A, his work will change. When I say tax professional, not just a practitioner, but also to the one in industry. A, the nature of his work will change. B, the nature of his work methodology will change. You cannot be getting into an office which is crowded and there's no social distancing. So maybe people work from home. People have to attend offices every alternate day. That's something that corporates could be thinking of. That's maybe something that tax practitioners will think of, saying that if my employees or my team members could work for 3 weeks from home, why don't I say that, look, I allow them to work from home 3 days of the week, and they come to office only 3 days of the week, and maybe there'll be rotation that some coming on the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, others coming on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So that's one. Second is that all of us, myself included, will have to change our management skill sets for whatever it is worth, and change our mindset more than anything else. If the mindset is, if I don't see a person in the office, then the doubt is, oh, is that person working or is he just slacking off? We will have to be better managers. We will have to believe that people who work from home are actually working from home. And then, as we say, trust begets trust. So if we don't want to be worried about what's happening on the minute to minute in terms of the employee working, so long as delivery of output is there in time, I think we will, as managers, have to accept it. Let me pause there. So what I've said is change in work content, change in work style, change in management style for each one of us, and more importantly, for each one of us to bring about the first three, it will have to be a change in mindset. So let me pause after the longest speech and hand it over to Jayant if he wants to supplement or disagree or express his views.
Saili, you want to have a word first?
No, I just want to say, after hearing all of this, that's certainly interesting and unpredictable times ahead. And I don't think anyone was prepared or can be fully prepared for it. So we'll have to take as it goes.
I almost entirely agree. I don't know much about BEPS and so on, but in terms of transfer pricing and the other four major conclusions that he drew, I entirely agree with you, Sunit. In fact, I would go one step further and say that, especially when I'm speaking about tax professionals, because I believe a lot of the people from the chamber would be in the practicing area. I think, although I know those who are in the chamber are the more studious types, so most of what I say may not really apply to them. But the nature of practice, the nature of tax practice will fundamentally undergo change. Volumes are going to disappear because today, even the maid servant working at my place phones and says that, "Madam, I can't come. Please make a transfer electronically to my bank account." So people are going to get confident about e-transactions, about electronic, data and so on. So a large chunk of our practice professionals who are based on 5,000 returns filing, etc., are simply going to be swept away, because as people's confidence in handling software-related returns, etc., is going to increase, that practice is going to get substituted, or it's going to be evaporating, frankly. Secondly, with the manner in which GST returns for mid-sized companies are actually cross-validating data, at one time there used to be people who jugaad ki practice karne wale. That practice is also going to go away. So what is going to be left? And the top layer, needless appeals, etc., are going to get costlier and not practically worthwhile. So it is only the layer that is concerned, and which of course I know chamber major part of the membership will be people who are well aware of the tax laws, who are studied, who are not dependent on volumes, but who are dependent on quality in terms of service to clients. So therefore, tax professionals will also have to gear around not volumes, but quality, and see that they are able to deliver value addition in terms of what they are giving to the client. And that will involve some degree of restructuring of the professional practice, especially in terms of tax compliance. And a large area of traditional practices were built on that. They will necessarily undergo a change. Why I'm mentioning it is because if you go to the old Bombay area, Sunil has familiar. You go starting from, say, Pedder Road onwards in South Bombay, Kaba Devi, and so on, Churchgate. You will find 20 chartered accountants in every building. That sort of regime is going to go away, and the whole scenario would change. That is what I am just sort of foreseeing the future. Yes, I do.
Okay, so maybe on this note, we can open the floor for questions. And if any of the attendees have any questions, you can post your questions on the Q&A tab. I will read those questions out to our panelists and maybe they can answer your questions there. So any questions?
Kylie, at this point, there are no questions.
Okay.
Maybe you can take the discussion a little further. If anyone has questions, please add them to the Q&A tab. We will take them up. Thank you.
Okay, so maybe in the meanwhile, maybe I can thank Jayant sir and Sunil sir for investing their time with us this Friday evening. And having said all of this, I would also like to add that the most important thing for all of us right now is to stay safe and healthy. So please take care of yourself and your loved ones. And so let the questions keep coming in. However, before we conclude this webinar, I would, okay, I can see one question. So Girish Maru, as per Mr. Gokhale, practice will change. What do you see future of SPM firms? So this is one question asked by Girish Maru.
Yeah.
So should I repeat?
So I think unless Sunil wants to say something, I'll go on. Sunil, do you want to say something on this?
Jan, please go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, as I said, you are asking, the person is asking for SMP firms, small and medium practicing firms, I take it. So there, as I said, the focus will have to change from compliance to advisory, point number one. And then that advisory should be such as to give value addition and not just run of the mill, because entities like Riverus and other persons who are providing databases, entities will come out with softwares which will enable filing of returns. So that entire, once people get confident, and tax return processing is happening wonderfully through their Bangalore processing unit, e-assessments are going to happen. So unless you restructure the small and medium practice, and for when I say restructure, many of them are 2-partner, 3-partner entities, maybe 3 or 4 persons. I know that many of the senior practitioners don't even know how to use a digital signature. So that era is going to go away, and you need to be tech savvy and IT updated. You can't say that I'm a tax practitioner, therefore I'm not concerned with IT. I think this is the fundamental mindset change that which was already coming in. As I said, it would have taken another 3-4 years, but now it's jor ka jhatka with no dheere se in that it is going to be immediate. That is how I look at it. I hope I have answered the question to the person who has raised it.
So we have one more question. What additional tax benefits should be proposed by the government?
So Saili, Jan, if you permit, I will try and answer that.
Yeah, please. Yeah,
So,
yeah, please.
So, if one looks at the ordinance, Section 4 of the ordinance, Section 4, subsections 1 and 2, allow for a deduction in respect of donation to PM CARES Fund, which is a Prime Minister's Citizen Assistance and Relief in Emergency Situations Fund. And that timeline, in accordance with clause 3, is available up to 30th June. And while this is good, what I think is quite possible is that in the current scenario, many of the requirements of donation or assistance are in the field of where you tell a hospital that, look, I'm willing to donate an amount of X, and it could be that X could be small or it could be large. What they are generally saying is, look, we don't have the time to accept your money and then to go out and buy supplies. we have ordered supplies which are essential. Can you please pay the supplier directly? Now, unfortunately, for us as donors, or for corporates as donors, while it qualifies as corporate social responsibility expenditure, such an amount which is directly contributed, a payment of this like directly to the supplier may tantamount to being a donation in kind, which is not eligible for a deduction under Section 80G. So I think the government could perhaps look at whether they could make an exception for the scenario that we are faced with. That's number one. Number two is similarly, there are certain entities, business entities, which are providing food to the migrant labor. And not all of them are NGOs. Mind you, some of them are corporate, some of them are business establishments which are providing food to the migrant labor, food to the aged because there are no food supplies available, or the aged people have no support staff uh, to kind of help them with their day-to-day activities. In which case, maybe even such activity should qualify for a deductible expenditure, either under 80G or perhaps even better as a deductible business expenditure. And I'm not saying that there will not be people who will try and misuse this facility. Yes, there could be. But I'm, at least in the current scenario, quite hopeful and optimistic that there could be 95% people who are honest, cognizant of what they are doing, and maybe the 5% who are dishonest in any case will be dishonest. So that's something I would expect, and perhaps as I speak, maybe the government is only thinking on those lines. So that is one benefit that perhaps the government could think of giving in addition to what has been given.
One quick addition to what Sunil mentioned. In fact, it is also regarding the PM CARES. You know, today the trusts have got a clause saying that if they violate any provision in the objects, then the trust is liable to lose its exemption in totality. The 12-way registration can be cancelled. Now, I had a recent situation where there is an education trust, for example, whose objects permit only expenditure on education. There are a whole host of objects they can give to other trusts engaged in education. But if that trust were to give to PM CARES fund, very noble objective, they are willing to give, they've got surplus funds, but technically one had to tell that they could possibly lose exemption for having given to PM CARES fund, because it is technically in violation of the main objects. So I think this sort of a thing, if it is specifically giving to PM CARES fund, which is obviously managed by the government, exemption should be there, that for that reason they would not be treated as a non-charitable entity. Otherwise, they lose their entire deduction. And I would have, means technically, I would have to advise such an entity that please don't give the deduction, you will lose your exemption. I think a change over there would be welcome.
Saili, we have time for probably one more question.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
I think
So,
Anish
there
has
is
raised
one
some question unless there is some.
Yes, so Mr. Anish Thakkar has one question here for us. Are there any changes to be made to employee contracts that may be required given the lessons learned from the lockdown?
Let me, although Sunil might want to add to that, let me quickly skip one point, that when I said changing the structure of practice, the practice of copying pasting agreements also needs to be given up, because force majeure, pandemics are things which have not been envisaged in various agreements today. Of course, coming to Anish's point, whether for those who are otherwise disadvantaged, for the ladies, whether any specific provisions need to be made, yes, there need to be something which would enable them to be home, not just for maternity leave, but possibly there can be other scenarios where one needs to build in certain safeguards, that if something like this happens, if say a relative is ill, one needs to look at possible some obligations that the lady of the house may have to undertake. So these are things which need to be built in. And the force majeure and other clauses that we need to be far more aware in terms of drafting future agreements. I think some agreements, some clients are going to lose out badly because force majeure has not been properly defined. But Sunil, anything to add on that?
Jayant, Anish, I would look at employees as friends of the business. And I have seen that most good managers don't need clauses in the contract to help work with their team members. So probably all of us need to be better team managers, and then the contracts should be written by lawyers. They are to be used only in case of dire need. So I would think maybe we need lawyers to draft the contracts differently. But as managers, we will have to be cognizant that we are dealing with human beings, although they may be team members and there are deadlines and there are targets to be achieved and so on and so forth. That's what I would say.
Okay, great. So there are a few more questions, but in interest of time, we won't be able to take all of them. So maybe on this note, I would like to thank Jayant sir and Sunil sir for investing their time for all of us. And so before we conclude this webinar, I would request the attendees to hang on for 5 to 10 minutes. Our customer success manager, Mr. Harshad Natu, will take you through a brief demo of Riverus Telescope offering. So over to you, Harshad.
Yes, thank you, Saili. And I'll quickly share my screen. So if everybody is able to see my screen. So a little bit about Riverus. Riverus is a legal tech company, and we have a solution for income tax research, wherein you get a ready research available on many issues in income tax. So all the time what you invest in researching on a thing, most of the time it's spent on searching for the right data. So here we provide you the right data to make your decisions. So this is the issue bank of our product, where you find all the issues are listed one by one. So there are some filters available on the left hand side, subject filters, and below that are the topic filters. So you can filter these issues. In addition to that, you can also search for an issue using the keywords. So the search button is given here. So if you are looking for some issue on section 14A, you can simply search here, and it will show you the results with respect to issues and industries and sections. So these many issues are available. So I'll just open any one of this, like applicability of section 14A when no direct expenditure is incurred. So once I open this issue, I get a brief description. So there is a follow button here. So if you start following the issue, you will get a notifications related to updates on this issue. The subject tags attached to this issue are given here. These are also clickable. So if you want to have a look at any similar issues which are covering this subject tags, you can use this. Then all the relevant legislative information, that is circulars or notifications or any income tax rules or their sections, if you want to have a look, then those are given here. The top cases on this particular issue are given in the next tab. So if you can see on the screen, the first case, Maxcorp Investments versus Commissioner of Income Tax. This is a Supreme Court case. So brief summary of it is available here. So key points and the outcome, you can just have a look at it. So all the relevant cases to this issue have been listed here one by one. The next tab is a tracker where you can see the recent developments on the issue. So for example, this first case, SB Holding Private Limited, this was decided on 3rd of February. So this tracking facility is also given here, and you can quickly access it. And most importantly, this product is mobile friendly. You can add it on your mobile home screen, and you can just access it from anywhere. When you have a free time of around 10-15 minutes also, you can just have a look at it. So the issues which you are following, you will get a notification with respect to updates from our side. So whatever issues or industries, whatever I'm following, you will get a update on it here. On the library, if you go, there is an industry-wise tracking facility available. So there are many practitioners involved who are catering to a very specific industry. So if you want to know the updates on or litigation, what is happening with them, you can start following an industry also. Similarly, you can also track a party where you get access to all the cases related to any specific company. So let it be TDS related matter, computational or transfer pricing, all types of litigations and cases, what is happening with the company, you can get it here. Also, you can request a party or an industry if you want to track. And there is a ask a service for issues as well. So here, if you don't find the issue which you want to, or on which you want the information, you can always ask for it, and our team will work on it and will make sure that it is added in our issue bank in next 2 to 3 working days. So this is one part of it. This is bundled with one more thing, that is research map. So Riverus has a repository of over 450,000 reported and unreported cases and orders in income tax. So if you want to do your research on your own, you can go to research map. The search engine is given here. You can just put in some keywords and you can start your research. Also, the unique feature here available is the lawyer analytics and judge analytics. So if you want to have a look at the judge profile of any specific judge, you can simply type his name here. So one of the famous judges at Bombay ITAT currently, Mr. R.C. Sharma. If you just want to have a look at his profile, you can simply go to his profile. So total number of cases decided by him, cases disposed of in last year, the outcome of those cases. So I can just see that almost in 2000 cases, he had given the decision in favor of assessee. Then 1400 odd cases were sent back to assessing officer. They were in remand. So basically you get an idea whether the judge is assessee minded, revenue minded. Then below that is the judge precedent search. So this is an interesting feature what is available there, where you get access to the top 10 referred cases by a judge. So for example, this first case, Godrej Boys Manufacturing Company Limited, this case Mr. Sharma have used as a precedent in 131 other cases. Also, there is a second case, that is Reliance Utilities. This is also one of the favorite case of this judge. If you want to search for the cases used by a particular judge on any specific topic or subject, you can go to judge precedent search. So if once you go there, you can just type in the keywords and you get the results with respect to the cases used as a precedent by that particular judge. Apart from this, there is a super search, that is a more forward search, wherein you can pre-select the parameters on which you want to see the cases, and this will give you more relevant results very quickly. So you can select the parameters using courts, judges, lawyers, etc. Search within text, you can do it precisely in 6 things. So either you can search for the keywords in full judgment, issues, key points, holdings, arguments, or even in the black letter law. There is a OR functionality given here, and function and filter is also given there. So if you want to look for 2 phrases simultaneously, you can use the OR filter. If you want to have any one of the key phrases mandatory, you can use the AND filter. So this is how it is. Similar logic is there for sections as well. You can add 2 or more sections, and filter is there, OR filter is also there. Also, you can exclude any specific filter if you want. Then there are legislation pages here. You can see the laws tab, wherein you get information about the statute. So if any notification, circular, rules, if you want, you can search here. Search engine is given. Also, the sections have been listed here chapter wise. So if you want to have access, or if you want to look at any particular section, you can access it from here. All the related sections are available on the left hand side. Related rules are also there, notifications, and below that are the circulars with reference to this particular section. Also, complete amendment history is available here. So if you could see what the years in which there was an amendment, these are the blue color balls which denotes the year of amendments. Also, we are able to extract the legislative intent related cases, wherein you can know how the intent has been used while deciding a case. So that we have highlighted in the purple color. I'll again go back to the home page. You can save your research work in the same product. So if you create tags to the cases, this will help you to save your time in later in the future to get the relevant cases quickly. So this is one functionality. There are many more features available. So if you are interested, you can just write to me on harshad@reverest.in, or even you can write it on hello@reverest.in. Thank you for joining.